Hello and welcome to the SEC Daily at Southeastern 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Gavin Schoenwald and our special guest, Jaron Hamilton. He covers Missouri football for PowerMizzou.com. He will be in our fine city, where I'll see him in the press box Saturday at First Bank Stadium, Missouri and Vandy. Jaron, thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well, sir.
Doing all right. How you guys doing today?
Great, man. Great.
Well, we've got a huge game for Missouri coming up. The Tigers ranked for the first time since October of 2019. And by the way, we got a lot of Missouri fans already here waiting. I don't know if we had maybe a mix-up and when the time was set up. Our man Blake is on Eastern time today and set this up. So I wonder if there might have been an error in translation in setting that up. So in any case, we are here now. We've got Gerard on with us. And Gerard, let's start here. Missouri so far hasn't been dominant. It's won its 3 games against Power 5 teams by, I think, 13 points, but it's won them all. That included a win over Kansas State. And I think you tell me if this is a good way to say it. It's maybe not a great team so far, but it's a solid team everywhere. It is balanced. It's got a back who's leading the conference in rushing. It's got one of the better playmaking receivers in Luther Burden. It's got a quarterback in Brady Cook who has been fantastically efficient. So I don't know that this team is great anywhere, but I don't know that there's a huge hole anywhere either. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate right now. They're still trying to find their footing on both sides of the ball. I guess in really all 3 phases of the game when you add special teams. Harrison Mevis did have some struggles to kind of start the season, and he was it was preseason. He was a second-team all preseason selection as a kicker. He had a couple of struggles first couple of games. Obviously, he bounced back with that 61-yard field goal to win the game versus Kansas State. He made both his field goals and everything last week versus Memphis, so that's turning in the right direction. They just changed punters actually to Luke Bauer from Riley Williams, who came over from Townsend. He was an all-conference punter last year, so I mean that tells you something. But Luke Bauer did pretty well punting the ball. But yeah, offense and defense, they've got things they can work on, but the offense is definitely a step above where it was at this point last year. It's definitely more fluid. They're getting the ball down the field and things like that. In the defense, which they consider their strong suit, still coming along. There's still some tweaks and things that need to happen, but they're still doing the things they need to do for the most part to win these games.
Gavin, I'll let you go here.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on all three phases there, because when I think of Mizzou and I think about my battles through my career, especially really since Drinkwitz has got there, it's been we're going to be able to contain the offense, but that defense is stout, and it has been really stout last year especially, and they've stepped it up this year as well. I want to talk, when I think about this conference and me playing in this conference specifically, you talk about teams who have, dudes. And when I say dudes, I mean guys on the defensive line. And when I think of those teams, I think of Georgia, Alabama, LSU, and really Florida, just because it's such a recruiting hotbed. They always have dudes, big, fast, strong guys that can run on the edge. And last year specifically, Missouri had a guy named Isaiah McGuire who was a monster, an absolute monster. And we had to look out for number 9 wherever he was the whole time. And in your next team, I talk about those guys that's those teams that have those dudes. I'd say next in line is Missouri as of late. It really is. And so, what do you think has been, the first thing to get those guys to campus and the recruiting strategy and getting those guys there? And then also just the defensive development of those guys to be, like McGuire picked in the NFL draft.
I mean, to get those guys, Drink has been, since he's gotten here, the recruiting has been, out of this world for Missouri, like having some of the best classes that they've ever had since he's gotten here. And I think something that's just made this even better is just Blake Baker, the DC here. The last couple of years, when you count last year and then this year, he's really got something going with this defense. And when he came in last year, he said something I felt that was a little unique that I don't know how many coordinators do this, but basically he took Steve Wilkes' 4-2-5 defense and put a little tweak in it. Instead of having that corner out there, he added an extra safety, but he basically said, I'm going to learn what you guys, since most of you are still here, I'm going to learn what you guys do. I'll add a couple tweaks, but I'm not going to change the whole thing and make y'all learn everything I need to know. So he kind of adjusted himself to what they had going on and then added his own little flavor to it. And then this year, you can kind of see with some of the unique things they're doing, especially when it comes to blitzing and stuff like that, that everybody's on the same page now. And again, they've had some lows on defense a little bit, but I feel like they're getting there. As far as that defensive front, what I really like about it the last couple of years is defensive end. Like you said, Isaiah McGuire, he's a dude. He got drafted by the Browns in the 4th round. They actually had an undrafted free agent named DJ Coleman, who's a part of the Jaguars right now.
Yep.
He was another guy. And coming into this year, they lost 4 defensive ends, their top 4 at defensive end. A couple of transfers. One went to Arkansas and Trajan Jeffcoat. The other went to Colorado and Arden Walker. And they've got this guy named Johnny Walker now at defensive end who they knew they had some potential in, but they wasn't really they wanted to see it. And he's been balling out right now. He's a true pass rusher. I'm pretty sure he leads the team in sacks. And then they took Darius Robinson, moved him from defensive tackle, moved him at edge. He's playing well, but he does have a calf injury. I think he's questionable going into this week. That'll be pretty big. But their interior defensive linemen also are pretty good. I don't know if anybody's like just great, but what they do is they have a great rotation. They brought back their top 8 defensive tackles from a year ago. So it's a group of guys who know how to play with each other. And as Al Davis likes to say, the defensive tackle coaches, he likes to use 2 players to represent one spot, basically. So it doesn't really matter who starts, to be honest, because they all get a similar amount of reps, the top 4 or 5 guys. So, I mean, that defensive line group is pretty stout.
Yeah, and I remember even going back to like the days of like Nick Bolton, like Missouri's always had like great players on the defensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
But to me now it feels like, I think you said it, they're playing better as a cohesive unit, and defensively, especially that's such an impact. And, I saw Missouri, when they played Memphis last week, it was the first game they'd given up 300 plus yards all year. And so you can lean on that defense for sure. And now, you mentioned the offense too, kind of coming into their own and creating explosive plays, getting the ball to Luther Burden. That kind of seems to be a recipe for success.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the key. And what's different about this team this year compared to last year is when the defense would have these lulls, where maybe they give up a touchdown or 2 where you're just kind of like, that doesn't seem like how they typically play throughout the game. The offense couldn't really save it, it felt like, for the most part. Like once that happens, it's kind of like, we're in trouble. And you see, obviously, versus Vandy last year. Yeah. I mean, 17-0 for Missouri early on, and then Vandy starts getting some momentum to cut the game down to 3, and the defense has to make the play to end the game. But that's where you would like the offense to kind of, okay, can you give us a boost? Can you give us something to kind of get some cushion? And that's something they've been able to do now. That's why they have 3 straight 1-score wins, and they've started 4-0.
Gerard, I want to ask you about injuries. You mentioned Darius Robinson and the calf. I was reading up on that earlier this week. It sounds like that's been a week-to-week thing where he gets out there, he goes, it bothers him, lather, rinse, repeat. Is that kind of where they are as we do this on Thursday with that?
Yeah, the first time we heard about it was obviously after the Memphis game. We didn't know that he's been having some type of calf problem until then. Drink said after the Memphis game that the calf locked up on him in the 4th quarter during the Kansas State game, and then it locked up on him again in the 1st quarter of the Memphis game, and then he was out for the rest of the contest. Again, questionable. They like the defensive ends they got to kind of be a rotational opposite Johnny Walker, but that is someone they don't want to lose. So that's a big deal. They said Luther Burden and Brady Cook are questionable also, but I 100% expect those guys to play. I think they were more banged up than anything. I did notice Luther Burden did have some wrap around his left ankle during practice, but Drink said they were full participants. So I wouldn't expect to worry about those guys missing the game.
Yeah, Burden was on the injury report, as was Brady Cook. I think I was reading your report this morning. I think Eli Drinkwitz called them questionable. I'm sitting here kind of internally rolling my eyes going, we'll see if those guys are questionable on Sunday. But is there something there with those guys we don't know about?
I think, like I said, with Burden, it was the ankle. It seemed like he had ankle taped up when I seen him on Tuesday during practice. And then with Cook, he had that hyperextended knee versus Kansas State in the 2nd quarter. He battled through that, obviously played well versus Memphis. That didn't seem to be the problem. I think, honestly, he's just beat up. He took a massive hit versus Memphis, doing a
Yes.
QB draw type play. And everybody kind of in the press box kind of knew, like, ooh, that's one of those things where you need to get your quarterback to slide. And
Mhm.
I mean, he's the toughest kid on the roster, but the problem is he's had a problem sliding. I mean, since he's become the starter, he just doesn't slide, and he's admitted it openly, and he jokes about it a little bit. But he better start sliding, or something more than the knee is going to be an issue for him. But I think it was more of a just kind of banged up for some of these hits he's taking. But I don't know. It shouldn't be something that affects him too bad, on Saturday.
If we can, Gerard, let's dive a little deeper into Brady Cook since we're talking about
Mhm.
him here. I feel like maybe more than anybody in this conference, he's had maybe the most improved quarterback. I mean, what a resurgence that he's had. And when you look at it, from a third party point of view, you've obviously watched way more game tape and know way more about this team than I do. From a third party guy who just looks at them from a 30,000-foot view, I see he's playing so well because he's efficient and he's not turning the ball over. And those are two things that usually lead to great quarterback play. But you have way more insider information and inside look than I do. What are some things that you're seeing in Brady this year that's different than what he put out last year?
I mean, there's a little list of things to go through. You mentioned, his efficiency and not turning the ball over. His last turnover, guess they don't count safeties as turnovers. He did have a safety versus MTSU, but if you don't count that, his last turnover was Week 8 versus Vandy last year. There was a strip fumble, and he threw a pretty bad interception during that game, but that was his last turnover. So he won't cost the team the game by giving the ball away and stuff like that. I think right now he's 72% completion percentage right now. He has 10 total touchdowns, 7 by via passing. But I think something that's been interesting with him is you can see that he's reading the field a lot better. I mean, there was plenty of times last year where you could just see him playing. You're just like, there's a guy there. You missed that. And at times that happens, occasionally still, but it's much better. His progressions, his reads are much better. Last year, he was the team's second leading rusher. He had somewhere between 545 or 585. It's one of those, but yeah, he was the second leading rusher with over 500 yards. This year, he's not really rushing that much. Maybe that has a little bit to do with the knee, but I feel like a lot of that is because he's got a better wide receiver room. The offensive line is much better than it was a year ago, and he's just reading the field better, and he's taking what the defense gives him.
And also, too, sorry, Chris, I want to jump back in here. As a former player, I look at, I remember my days playing and, media and family and your great uncle after a tough game. Everybody's got all the right answers except for the people in the building. You know what I mean? And I feel like Brady Cook has heard the noise a little bit, to be honest with you, about the backup maybe getting some plays and this and that. And when he came out and said that thing about I love playing quarterback here at Mizzou. I wish everybody else felt the same way. That kind of hit me a little bit, man. That sparked a fire in me as a former player, and it seems like that dude's really got a chip on his shoulder, man. It really does. And you mentioned it, toughest kid on the team. Look, if you're saying that, and we see that as well, I guarantee you, everybody in the locker room feels that way.
Sure.
What is it about Brady as a competitor that you think sparks a fire in this team?
This kind of segues. I need to go back a step. Another thing is he had a torn labrum in his right shoulder last year. He played 97% of the snaps with that. So I think he played a game and a quarter or something like that. And then he tore it, and he still played pretty much every snap for the rest of the season, including the bowl game. So that obviously has something to do with his play last year versus this year. But yeah, he's a tough guy. I don't know. He takes a heck of a beating sometimes, but he keeps getting back up. He keeps playing. He keeps showing up. And the guys just love him. They see a great leader, someone who has a passion for this school, and someone who wants to compete. I mean, I don't know. They just love him. He has heard some of that stuff, and like you said, when he said, I wish everybody would want me to be the quarterback for Mizzou. I feel like that hit everybody. Just like, dang, and not even just from a media perspective. You could just feel that as a person. Like, I'm trying my best, and some people are very critical, and some of it's deserved, but also a lot of it isn't. Sometimes people just go overboard with things, and so for him he always does it the right way. He could have days where he could just. We say this in the media all the time, like, after his game versus Kansas State, we wouldn't be surprised if he came in there and just said, you were wrong, y'all don't know what you're talking about. and we would 100% get it. But all he does is he's respectful about it. He talks about how much he loves the university, working for his teammates, fighting alongside his teammates, and then he shows it on the field. And he's been showing that, especially these last couple of games for sure.
Well, he's also got some help out of his running back room. And I know Cody Schrader wasn't a guy that everybody had on their all-SEC checklist, but here we are through week 4, and he's leading the SEC in rushing, and we can say, well, strength of schedule, whatever. The fact is Missouri has played stronger defenses than most teams in this league have so far, and Kansas State and Memphis, and who am I leaving out? MTSU defensively, I mean, it's a group of 5. It's not Power 5. My point is they're not playing these teams that are giving up 40 points a game like some others. And he's put up decent numbers. He's steady, 6.2 yards per carry. I don't know he's a guy that you've got the game plan around defensively, but he's given them just enough. What has he meant to this team? And they've also got Isaiah Pete there, who's a little bit of a different look. It feels like they found something in the running game that maybe they didn't have a year ago.
Right. So with Schrader, yeah, you may not have to necessarily game plan, but he is someone who could sneakily wreck your day if you can't contain the run. He's already got 200-yard games this season. I think last week was his most impressive performance because he fumbled second quarter, something like that. His first fumble as a Tiger in 2 years, and they threw him back out there. I think he finished with 123 yards. He got 112 of that in the second half. And he capped the game off with a 37-yard touchdown run. The thing about him is he's not necessarily a burner or anything, but he's consistent. He's always going to fall forward and make something out of nothing. That was actually a big problem for Missouri last year. I think they were ranked 122nd or 123rd in tackles for loss. So they would get stuck behind the chains all the time, trying to dance and juke and do too much behind the line of scrimmage. Not Cody. He's always going to make sure he at least gets, a couple yards out of something. And like I said, the offensive line is a little bit better. It's still a work in progress for sure, but it's a little bit better. And he's finding some holes to run through. So that kind of helps his cause too. As far as Nate Pete, he's their, I guess, change of pace back. He's pretty fast and dynamic. He can break one loose. He does kick returns sometimes as well. So they have a nice little 1-2 combo going there. One game you may see, Schrader get 15 carries and Pete only gets, 6 or 7 touches. Next game you may see, Schrader get maybe 10 or 11, and then it's, Pete's turn to have it. So they kind of got a balanced attack back there.
I think especially when you think about Cody Schrader, first off, I mean, what a gem to find by Missouri, a transfer from what is it? Truman State?
D2,
yep.
yeah.
Transfer from Truman State.
Yep.
And like you guys said, look, he's not gonna beat you. As if I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm looking, I say, okay, this kid's not gonna beat us by himself. But I think especially now with what we've seen with Missouri of the explosive plays, getting the ball on the edge to playmakers. I saw it last year with Lovett, but now they're doing it times 10 with Burden. Is Schrader is just good enough to keep your defense honest because he runs his tail off and runs hard, can get those 5-6 yard runs on third down where you swear they're passing it. And he puts his pads down and falls forward, like you said, for a first down. So it does just enough to keep the defense honest and still have to play the run. But, like we've seen this year, the reason why Missouri's offense has gone to another level is because of their explosive plays. What have you seen? And obviously, like I said, they lost an explosive player. And love it last year. We're seeing this year explosively, Gerard, compared to last year, even though they're down maybe an explosive player.
Yeah, it's a couple things. So they brought in Kirby Moore from Fresno State to be the offensive coordinator, and Drink kind of stepped back, and he's now kind of absorbed more of a CEO type of head coach where, he gets to just be balanced. He gets to check in on everything. Actually, he's helping more with the special teams, if anything. But, he gets to kind of let Kirby do his thing. And Missouri kind of played coy the first couple of weeks. And basically they won those first 2 games with the offense that was similar to last year, which was, not going to lie, a little bland. You was wondering, this can't be the explosive offense they've been saying they had all year. They showed it in weeks 3 and 4. And so Kirby Moore, basically his spread offense-like system and getting the ball to many different people's hands and spreading it out. They've got a better wide receiver room because, They lost Dominic Lovett, who went to Georgia. Yeah, that's an all SEC guy, but they had so many slot guys last year that they had to put Burden on the outside, and he can do it because he's super talented, but that's not where you want him to be. You want him to be in the slot. That's where he is now. And now they've kind of got pieces for the wide receiver room that they need. They've got Theo Weiss, a guy who can stretch the field. I think he averaged like 19 yards per catch last year. He's a good red zone target as well. They've got players like Dennis Jackson, another guy who can play inside or outside. He's like Luther as far as play type. You want him in space. He can make a defender miss in space. And then they got Marquise Johnson. This is a freshman. If you've seen last week's game, he had a 76-yard touchdown on like the third offensive play of the game versus Memphis. They really like him. He's the fastest player on the team already. And there was one play that I said I've never seen before. He basically took the safeties and everybody with him, and Luther caught a crosser, and he had literally closest defender was maybe 20 yards away. Like, they've got pieces who can kind of take a little bit of the attention off of Luther just because of what they can do. So it's just a dynamic core, and Luther, of course, himself has gotten bigger, stronger for sure. You can't just tackle him, with one guy, and he's gotten better with his hands. He's got better with everything. I thought he was more of a he's quick guy. You want the ball in his hands to make people miss, but he's actually a lot faster than he was last year. So, I mean, they've just gotten better in the receiving room in general.
LC he's tough. That kid has taken some licks this year. My goodness.
Some big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a lick versus MTSU. Actually, was it 2 games in a row? I want to say maybe 2 games in a row. He took like a headshot, like a targeting shot. And MTSU, it was a pretty big hit. But the thing is, I've probably seen him take 3 or 4 big licks this year, and he instantly gets up, like no problem. And that's kind of a big thing because you compare this to last year, his first 5 or 6 games, it felt at least like maybe once a game he limped to the sideline or he's grabbing at his shoulder or something like that. And obviously a true freshman playing SEC ball, that's going to happen. No one's, saying anything about it, but you can just see the growth and how much bigger and stronger he's got compared to last year.
Jaron, we're this far in, and I would have thought if we had you on to talk about Missouri's 4-0 start, we would have led with some guys we haven't even mentioned yet, because I thought their back 7 coming into this year with Rakestraw and Abrams Drain and Charleston and Tyron Hopper was probably the strength of their team. I think they're still really good players. Just you've had some guys on offense that have grabbed the spotlight a little bit. I think that bunch is awfully good. What have they meant to the defense so far this year?
Yeah, so Abrams Drain and Rakestraw are probably one of the top, if not the top, cornerback duos in the country. I think Ennis Rakestraw is very underrated. If you look at his stats from a season ago compared to Abrams Drain, he has a good argument to have had just as good of a season as Abrams Drain, even though Abrams Drain is usually the guy covering teams number 1. I probably expect him to be on Will Shepherd this weekend. But they have great cornerbacks. Safeties are pretty good. The problem with the safeties, I just did an article about this a couple of days ago, is they're getting beat in man coverage pretty badly. I mean, they're letting some plays happen, and Drinkett said they're basically playing too much hero ball. So they're getting their eyes caught in the backfield, trying to jump routes and things like that, and that's leading to tons of 3rd down problems, 4th down problems. I'm forgetting the ranking, but Missouri does not do well on versus teams in 4th down. They've given up a number of 4th down conversions. And then over the last 3 games, opponents are 45% on 3rd down. So they're getting caught up with some stuff. But overall, when this defense is right, especially that, that back line, it's a really good back line. They just kind of got to lock in on their jobs and stick to what their responsibilities are.
Any storylines to watch for this one that maybe we haven't gotten into? I know Missouri's got a kicker who can hit a 61-yard field goal at the end in the pinch if needed. I've always kind of liked him. It's been an up and down career, but maybe is there something that we should be talking about in this matchup here that we're not?
I think there's a couple things. So one, and maybe not Missouri's not thinking about it as much, or Vandy's not thinking about it, but it's something I just feel like has to be in the back of somebody's mind. It's just as far as like possibly being a trap game. So for the whole offseason for Missouri, it's been, probably be 4-1 versus LSU when that game happens in week 6, because a lot of people, including myself, thought they would lose versus Kansas State. They could be 4-1. They thought they can make some noise. Now, obviously, they beat K-State, so now the thing is, they could be 5-0 and they face LSU, blah, blah, blah. Start looking at that. And I don't think maybe that's where their head's at, but it has to be something that to think about. Vandy is not an easy opponent for this team. I think last 3 of the last 4 been pretty close contests between these two teams. So it's not something they're scoffing at. And Drink said it earlier this week. He thinks Vandy has one of the most, if not the most talented wide receiver group in the country. So considering that, their struggles on 3rd and 4th downs, their struggles in man coverage, this isn't something where they can kind of just take Vandy lightly. Another thing I'm thinking about is just if, as far as like how will Missouri's defensive line, get pressure on Swan if he's in there, or Seals, whoever's, at quarterback. Can they get some pressure, especially if Darius Robinson isn't there? Can they take advantage still of them not having their quarterback who's second in the league in passing? Like, what can they do with that if that happens? I think that's something to watch for.
I think something that Missouri has to be careful with, and maybe all of us, is Vandy has been atrocious at turning the ball over, atrocious, and they've still, maybe not the Kentucky game, but it still got close. Chris and I, you and I were there in the middle of the 3rd quarter. If Vandy plays a full, clean game of not turning the ball over, we don't really know what that team looks like, to be honest with you. The only Vandy team we know is shooting themselves in the foot by turning the ball over and trying to play catch up. And so, what does Vandy look like if they go out and play a clean game? And I think Drink said it best is, the strength of Vandy's team is in the receiver room. You got guys like Shepard, you got guys like London Humphreys, a true freshman who's been playing football for 3 years and is just a freak decathlete, Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Tennessee. And so talent all over the receiver room, all over the offense, but just been shooting themselves in the foot with these turnovers. And, so to me, Chris, your original question was, is there any underlying storylines in this game that maybe we're not talking about? To me, it's the turnovers. If Vandy can find a way to not turn the ball over, or if Missouri, who's been great at not turning it over, all of a sudden has a couple turnovers, this could get a little haywire. It could. And, if it sticks to the scripts of what the season's been of Missouri being great about protecting the ball and Vandy not great about protecting the ball, Missouri probably is getting out of this one 5-0. But if Vandy can find a way to not turn the ball over and then maybe create 1 or 2, Gerard, we saw it last year, creating the turnover on the goal line, a monster hit. An unbelievable SportsCenter top 10 play. It changed the whole direction of the game. It was 17-0. That play changed the direction of the game. And so, to me, it's the turnovers in this game on both sides of the ball. And we'll see if that script kind of sticks to what it is. But if it doesn't, I think things could get interesting.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to Billy Derrick, also working with Chris at Vandy Sports, and that was literally the last thing I said. You just brought it up, hit it right on the nail as far as like turnovers. Missouri, I think they're 3rd in the nation in giveaways. They've only got 2 this year. Again, they're really good at protecting the ball. And then Vandy, they've been turning it over. But also, I noticed Vandy is tied for 1st or they're 2nd with 7 interceptions this year already. So they can get on the ball. They can make those plays happen. They just got to kind of be safe with the ball. And Missouri, I've been saying this year, if you haven't watched Missouri games like that, you don't know, but Missouri fans know this. Sometimes they have a propensity to do and have unforeseen events happen to them. So like you go back to last year versus Auburn with that missed field goal and then the fumble in the end zone. Like that's not something you would predict to happen. The thing versus Kentucky with the weird punt, that was so weird. The SEC had to make a rule about it. Things like that where you just kind of like, that's crazy. Things like that actually happen far more than it probably should. And so they've got to be careful of that. They cannot overlook Vanderbilt for whatever reason they may think they can. I don't think they are, but just if they are, they can't overlook Vandy for any reason, really.
All right, Gerard, I got to ask you one question on the way out. Now, I wouldn't be doing my job is running the Southeastern 14 channel. You may not know this, but Blake Lovell, one of my normal co-hosts here who's off this week, we do a basketball show, and he has been big on Dennis Gates since before he even, they even tipped it off the first time in Columbia. And he's got a little bit of a relationship with Dennis dating back to his years at Cleveland State. So we have a running joke But Blake is so pro Dennis Gates that we refer to him as Dennis Gates' agent. So that's the inside of the joke of people have, are tuning into the channel and hear us reference that at times. But for Dennis Gates' agent, who's not here today, I got to ask you this. Missouri is recruiting at a really high level, went to the tournament last year. How excited are folks for the future of Missouri basketball with what he's doing in particular in recruiting?
All right. They're excited. I'll tell. Well, let me start with this first. My partner Drew King, who covers the basketball team, he's much more well in depth to know about this subject, but I do know a
Gotcha.
little something. I will say this: they're recruiting at a spectacular level, and the excitement for this team is through the roof. I mean, it's been a minute. I'm sure that it's like that the football team is doing well, and then you got the basketball team. Like there's hype around this program in all facets. And it kind of started during the summer with Missouri's football recruiting, obviously getting Williams Nwaneri. That is like everybody's like, whoa. I mean, they got a top 3 player in the country. Now you go to basketball and they're recruiting at an incredible level, and they still got a chance to get one of these big 5 stars coming out. Like some things it's shaping up down here in Columbia, and they're more than excited for Dennis Gates and this team, and hopefully they can get past the round of 32 is what a lot of the fans are hoping this year.
Man,
well,
Gerard's
just getting
Gerard's like, man, I haven't thought about basketball since March, bro. Season dog, no, but I hear you, man. Missouri basketball, the future is exciting for sure.
Well, Gerard, thank you for taking your time out of a busy week to join us. Now, I've got to ask you, have you made the drive between Como and Nashville before?
Yeah, I've actually made this drive a few times in the past few months, actually. So,
oh, really? Okay.
I'm very familiar. I used to work in Tennessee like a year ago. I worked in Jackson, Tennessee. So I've covered high school football and all types of championship events in the Nashville, Murfreesboro area. So I'm already familiar with the spot a little bit.
Well, I was going to warn you, that is not the most exciting of drives between those two cities. Get the podcast feed ready.
Oh, always. I find it easier if I leave early in the morning and then I get there in the early afternoon. Like I feel better about myself. If I wait too long, it's going to be a long day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be an early start in that case. Well, hey, I look forward to seeing you in the press box at First Bank Stadium on Saturday. God bless you. Have a great drive and be safe.
Appreciate you guys. This was fun. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerard.
Absolutely. All right, Gavin, I want to ask you some things about the matchup in just a minute because you've been on the other side of it for the last 4 or 5 years, except for this year, having played at Vanderbilt. But before we do that, a quick shout to one of our 2 sponsors, CHOMPS. My goodness, guys, every time I need a protein boost, I go in the pantry, I grab that bag of CHOMPS, and I get about a 60 to 100 calorie snack that has no stuff that's bad for me, no sugar. It gets my salty fix. It gets my protein fix. It has got stuff. If you got kids, it got allergens. It's got none of those things in there that can give you problems. It's a minority-owned, family-owned business. They make great stuff, and you can get some for yourself. Get a great snack, help out the site, and get a discount. You can see in the ticker below where to go for that, and you get a 15% off discount. Anyway, CHOMPS has become a go-to snack for me lately. I got all kinds of empty wrappers and boxes around this house, but because boy, they're good. No Raptors, but in any case, give CHOMPS a try, and I think you'll be glad that you did. Okay, Gavin, you played against Missouri a year ago. What was a close game? What scares you the most about that team?
Sorry, Chris, you broke up a tiny bit. Repeat that for me.
Oh, sorry. Well, having played against Missouri a year ago, if you're a coach, if you're Clark Lee in the other room, what is concerning you most about what Missouri does?
Man, I think that we hit it with Gerard a little bit, but football is an imperfect game. It's an imperfect game. You go through, 2 padded practices Tuesday, Wednesday. You're in some shells or even just helmets on Thursday, and then a walkthrough on Friday. And you plan, and every one of your practices, especially later in the week, is perfect. Some teams even call it perfect Fridays, right? The walkthroughs are perfect. The problem is it's an imperfect game, but Missouri's playing damn advantage and not the ball. And so, as efficient as they are, you look as a defense and as opposing coaches, we got to capitalize off mistakes. We know, the first 2 games, the offense, as Gerard said, was a little bland. They've exploded now with explosive plays, chunk plays, runs of 12 plus and passes of 15 plus. And those are usually, results for a lot of points. And so as an opposing team, it scares me because I know since they don't make mistakes, I know damn well we can't make mistakes as well. And, that's what scares me about this game for Vanderbilt is that's been the story of their season so far is the mistakes and shooting themselves in the foot. And so, as a defense, Vandy's got to find a way to create turnovers and maybe find a way to make Brady Cook uncomfortable. As an offense, man, I'm telling you, it's just about taking care of the ball because Vandy can score. They've got the players, they've got the guys. They just got to take care of the ball. And so that's what scares me as an opposing coach is you don't know how many times you're going to have the ball just because they're not going to give it to you.
You got to Vandy in, was it 2019?
Yeah, 18.
Okay, so you were there for this. Do you remember the last time Missouri was ranked?
Yeah. Oh, do I remember, Chris? That was
you were on the field.
Win.
I'm putting this on a tee for you.
Okay,
maybe more for the benefit of our listeners. But the last time Missouri was ranked was 2019, mid-October, I believe it was, and Missouri was 5-1 and came to Nashville to face a Vanderbilt team that was probably struggling then even more than it was now. Vanderbilt switched quarterbacks, went to a kid named Mo Hassan who didn't play much before and barely played since, and Vanderbilt engineered an upset of Missouri in that one. And I'm listening to Clark Lee speak this week, and the turnovers, their turnover problem has been absurd. I was looking this up the other day. Of their 9 turnovers the last 3 games, 4 of them have come back for touchdowns. And I think 3 of them have set the opponent up inside the 20, another one on the other side of midfield, and another one it was on the opponent's side of midfield, but it wasn't far. So they have just been gift wrapping opportunities for Missouri, which does not turn the ball over, as we have mentioned.
Yeah.
So
rub in a little bit more, Chris. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Well, yeah, you're welcome. But point being is I feel like if you listen to Clark Lee this week, it felt like he was putting some guys on that offense on notice. And I wonder if we don't see something similar to where you see some guys maybe getting a chance that weren't before in an attempt to kind of jumpstart a lagging football team.
Yeah, I think, look, man, like that is the quickest way to lose football games is obviously turn the ball over. And then what Vandy's done in terms of turn the ball over for immediate points. It's the quickest way to lose games. I look at Vandy's offense, and I'm really trying to be unbiased here as well. To me, you talk about getting new guys in there and playing. The first guy that comes to mind for me is Quincy Skinner. And for Quincy, look, I know it's a crowded receiver room, and Shep and Humphreys are and even Jaden McGowan are some of the better guys in that room. But to me, Q is one of the few guys in that room who can break a tackle at the line of scrimmage and turn it into a 22, 25-yard play. He almost did it last week against Kentucky. They called him out of bounds after review. But he has the chance to really break one. And I think that's really what Vandy's offense needs in this game is that touchdown that comes from the -30. It's like a 70-yard touchdown, a 65-yard touchdown. It may be hard for them to methodically move the ball down the field against Missouri's defense. They're that stout. And so for me, if I'm Vandy, I'm hanging on the big play. And when I'm hanging on the big play, what guys can we get in there to do it? And they have the to me, I would love to see Quincy Skinner get the ball more in his hands because that guy can break a game wide open.
The other thing with Vanderbilt, and if people just looked at the score last week, it was 45-28. Again, 2 of those were pick sixes. Another one set Kentucky up for shorter field. And look, maybe this was the game got out of hand. It was 21-0 in the first quarter, and maybe Kentucky left its foot off the gas, didn't concentrate. I don't know. I'm not making excuses for Kentucky, but here's the point I'm getting at. Vanderbilt's defense started to play better. After that initial shock. And again, some of that was turnovers. And Vanderbilt's missing 3 starting defensive backs, basically, kind of almost 4.
Mhm.
And I thought did an okay job against Devin Leary. If Vanderbilt gets a little healthier this week and can tap into maybe some of that aggressive calling approach, I saw the seeds of some things that might have started to work for them a little bit on that side of the ball, where honestly that they've not been very good, that we really hadn't seen much of the season so far.
Yeah, I think look, and I was obviously in the building the past 2 years with Coach Lee and him, kind of revitalizing the program from what it was. Being a defensive guy coming from Notre Dame, I think he's always had this vision of aggression and swarm to the ball and also playing within structure for his defenses. And, look, it's been a tough start to the season. I think I think that maybe that defense is maybe coming into its own a little bit, especially towards the end of last game. And the only problem is, they're playing at that level and the offense, I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but the offense has been horrible in terms of turning the ball over, and then you're screwing over your defense as well. And so you talk about playing complementary football. Look, is your offense playing well? That's great. Okay, if your defense isn't playing well, it doesn't matter as much. If it's vice versa, defense is creating turnovers, getting stops, but the offense is going 3 and out, it doesn't really mean much. Where you find success, especially in this conference when everybody's got players, everybody's extremely talented, is guys that can play complementary football. The 3 phases of football, complement each other. They've been solid on special teams, got great punts out of Matt Hayball. They just got to find a way to play complementary football on both the offensive and defensive side.
All right, Eric brings up a good point here.
Great point. It's a great point.
Missouri hadn't missed Dominic Lovett. Dominic Lovett has done nothing at Georgia that I remember. Was Missouri's leading receiver a year ago. Although I'll bring up a point here, okay? I mean, Luther Burden is dominated that stat sheet for Missouri's receivers, and you look at it, they've got after him Mookie Cooper, 8 for 137, Theo Weiss Jr., the Oklahoma transfer, who's gone 14 for $136, and Marquise Johnson, 2 for 118. So I don't know who Cooper's kind of just a guy who's been around and played a lot of football. Weiss was a former 5-star recruit who never really, I guess, got to that level of performance at Oklahoma. I'm a little curious as to, let's say Lovett, or let's not Lovett. Let's say Luther Burden goes down in that game. That's going to change, or any game for that matter. That's going to change the dynamic for Missouri's offense, no matter who it's playing. And I do have some questions about, does Missouri have a number 2 guy who can kind of step up into the role of a 1 and be a guy who keeps that passing game playing close to the level at which it has played so far?
Yeah, well, I think, look, absolutely. Luther Burden, and I've used this term before, is a game breaker. And when I say that term, I mean, if the guy has a good game, he can literally win the game by himself. And there's few people in this conference that can do that. Luther Burden's one of those. But to me, if he goes down, does it change Missouri's offense approach? Absolutely. But I think I'm just as interested to see how it changes Vandy's defensive approach, because I guarantee you this week, Coach Lee and all the defensive guys over there are zeroed in on where that guy is at every single down. And so, if he's not in the game, is there a backup game plan? And, obviously offensively, you got to have kind of a backup game plan of what you turn to if your star player goes down. But, you're not going to be able to key that guy anymore if he's sitting on the sideline as a defense. And so, I think that was a great point that Eric brought up about Lovett, because to me last year, Luther Burden was the big play guy. But Lovett was Mr. Consistent, who was getting 9, 10, 12, yards each play, and can kind of bail him out on 3rd down. I'm surprised that they're not missing him more as well, and maybe even more surprised that maybe he's not being utilized at Georgia as much.
Before we talk a little more football, got one more shout out to a show sponsor. That is Andy Ludicky and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're out there looking for a change of careers, want to own your own business, whatever the case may be, you might give Andy a shout. What Andy does is they talk to people like you and me, and they get a good idea of your interests and skills and all those things. And maybe just as importantly, what you want out of life. If you're like me, I've got 2 kids, want to spend a lot of time with them. That's hard to do sometimes in a corporate job or whatever your case may be. And so Andy tries to get an inventory of what you're good at and what you want out of life. And they've got all these franchises out there that they work with. They'll match you with one. And they do not steer you to one that pays them more than another one pays them. None of that nonsense. Andy is a good, honest guy. The consultation is free. They will do all kinds of stuff to help you. My perfect franchise has changed so many lives for the better by putting people in much better situations. So go to myperfectfranchise.net. If you talk to Andy Ludicky, who's a friend of mine, tell him that you heard about his business on Southeastern 14. Anyway, you'll be glad that you did that. Get any lease on life. Check out myperfectfranchise.net. And I think you will be very pleased with the options that they can present you. Gavin, I think we had this social media talk earlier in the week a little bit, didn't we? I feel like we did, or was that me and maybe Blake?
What specifically about it?
Well, what prompted this thought was the Brady Cook comment.
Oh, yeah, like
about
you're talking about players and their relation to social media during the season and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean I'm with you. When I heard him make that comment, that kind of broke my heart a little bit.
I don't know if it broke my heart, but to me, I related to the kid more than anything.
Sure.
Because as a player, I mean, think about this, and I at the end of the day, don't get me wrong, this is the Southeastern Conference. It is about wins and losses. It is the most cutthroat conference in the country for a reason. Best players, best coaches, most NFL draft picks, you name it. At the same time, these dudes are just like you and I, man, and you're training and doing, to have a whole fan base behind you. And all Brady Cook has done. Look, is he a top 3, top 4 round, NFL quarterback drafted kid? Probably not. He's probably not that talent. But the kid is tough as nails. He doesn't turn the ball over. And to me, he's a coach's dream. He's a coach's dream, and you appreciate the heck out of him. And so, if I'm his teammate in the locker room, I know that more than anybody, that he's not, Caleb Williams talent, or I would even say like a Spencer Rattler arm talent. He's just not that player. But I'm going to ride for that guy over and over again. And so when he said that after the game, it kind of lit a spark in my heart, to be honest with you, because I felt for the kid, I related to the kid, and it made me, I think he's an easy guy to cheer for, especially after seeing, what he said. And so, Brady Cook definitely he gained a fan that day, no doubt.
Were you a put the phone away and don't check social media guy after a tough loss?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you try to be consistent with it too, with after a big win, because otherwise you're just kind of, if you look and read into social media after a big win, but don't look at it after a loss, then you're kind of hypocritical. But I try to stay out of it as much as I could. I was probably on it more so during the bye weeks, just because it was, the best way to get news and whatnot. But I try to stay off it as much as I can, but all that stuff is very real. And so just, look, I'm not trying to tell, people and watching to take it easy on your players and whatnot, because this is, like I said, it's about wins and losses and cutthroat. But just know that, whatever you say about a kid it might and probably will get seen by him. Just know that.
Well, Sam Pittman's been very vocal about that this week for Arkansas. Just some of the stuff that has been said to his kids, some things that have been said to him. I think he, has probably brushed aside the stuff that was said to him, but, maybe took a little personally the stuff that's been said to his kids. So that's kind of been in the forefront of talk this week, and that's why I bring it up. All right, let's switch gears a minute. You've not been on with us a couple times this week just because of personal business. We got games this Saturday. We've got Florida at Kentucky, A&M at Arkansas, Georgia at Auburn, Missouri at Vandy, LSU at Ole Miss, South Carolina at Tennessee, Alabama at Mississippi State. Let's throw Vandy, Missouri out for personal reasons. But what if you had to pick one game to watch this week of those other ones, which would it be and why?
I'll give you one. I have a few, obviously, that stand out. To me, the Ole Miss LSU game is really interesting, because what a turn from at this point last week, Chris. You and I were sitting here with the beat writer for Ole Miss, and talking about how important and how huge, and this is the time for Lane Kiffin. And now, yeah, Chris, I saw your social media too. You know, that temperature is getting a little,
Yeah.
people aren't as happy as they were in Oxford now. And you know, we talked about it as well. Lane Kiffin's 1-19 against teams that go on to win 9 games, and he's getting paid $9.5 million a year. And so now is the storyline, can Lane win the big ones? Can he win and beat the good teams? And so not only is that true with this upcoming game, welcoming LSU to town, but you come off an emotional, you know, draining loss against Alabama, where you swear this was going to be the biggest, you know, catapult for your program forward. And now you got to turn around in 7 days and respond and play just as good, if not a better team in LSU at home. And so I'm interested to see how they respond. The Tennessee game as well, obviously, just because of the implications of what happened last year, super interesting to me. I saw a comment this week that, you know, they were asked about the noise in Neyland Stadium, and I'm sure it will be an unbelievable atmosphere, especially with a night kick. And like I said, for what happened last year, and Spencer Rattler basically acknowledged it and said, "Yeah, it's going to be a wild game, but you know, we'll be all right and we'll do our best." And for some reason, Tennessee fans thought that like that was bulletin board material. What do you want them to say? Like, yeah, we're screwed. like you know. And so I'm not, that game has a potential to get spicy as well. And we've seen some spicy, you know, night games involving mustard in the past in Neyland Stadium as well. So we'll see what happens this Saturday. But those two, you asked me for one, I gave you two. Those are the two that stand out to me, Chris.
Well, it's hard to pick one. I think most of the games are compelling this week for one reason or another. I think it's going to be that way the rest of the season. It's kind of what we thought it was before the year. I thought there would be more parity. I mean, I say it's what we thought it was. I think there's been even more parity than we thought. Georgia has not looked dominant.
No.
Alabama has not looked dominant. LSU lost that game pretty decidedly to Florida State in its opener at a time we were all thinking LSU was a national title contender. But I want to go back to Ole Miss for just a minute, because the narrative this week has been a little bit of, or maybe narrative might not be the right word, but there's been a little discussion of about, okay, are we back to a two-team race between LSU and Alabama for the SEC West? And look, at both those teams, their losses have come out of conference, and same for A&M for that matter. If you want to throw a third,
yeah, that's fair.
Have we discounted Ole Miss too early?
I think we're going to learn everything we need to know about the future of Ole Miss this weekend. I do, because and let's, you know, if we want to rewind the conversation too, I just kind of opened up and told you about what it's like from a player's perspective of social media in the heat of the season. You think Lane Kiffin's not on Twitter and seeing all this stuff that you're seeing? And so if we're on here talking about it, Chris, he's scrolling through and refreshing his timeline, reading about himself as well. And so don't think that he doesn't know that, you know, the jury's a little questionable on him as well. And so I think we're going to find out. Look, if Ole Miss finds a way to beat LSU at home this weekend, now you look at it as, you know, LSU has 2 losses now, 1 conference loss. LSU still has to play Alabama. You know, if A&M can beat Arkansas, now you're talking about 4 teams that have a potential, really a race in the West. And then, like you said, on the East side, Georgia hasn't looked nearly as dominant as they have in the past. And that's something I need to see as well this weekend. Is I need to see them in rhythm, going on the road in Jordan-Hare. It's Hugh Freeze's, you know, SEC home opener. That place is going to be rowdy, welcoming the back-to-back national champions. We talked about earlier in this week that line's been moving down a little bit. Maybe there's something we don't know, Chris. But, you know, to me, I need to see Carson Beck in rhythm. I need to see their players making plays. Defensively, I think that Kirby's always going to have those guys playing well. But offensively, man, they need to be aggressive. They need to be the aggressors, and they kind of look like they're just going through the motions, to be honest with you, offensively at least. And so I need to see them get back on track. You know, who knows what's going to happen in that LSU Ole Miss game. And then you talk about 2 desperate teams and desperate coaches in that game at Jerry's World. I mean, ever since that Miami loss, you know, now every single game probably times for Jimbo and A&M. And then, you know, Arkansas-wise, Sam Pittman, as we all know, he's just kind of been steady Eddie of, you know, they've been way better than they were with Morris, but man, I think there's another level for Arkansas fans in terms of the vision of that team as well. So going to be a really interesting weekend all the way around, super fun games. And so, yeah, I'll be glued to the couch for quite a bit.
Yeah, for the sake of that one, because that was the one I was going to bring up next. I wish for Arkansas' sake they could get that BYU game back. That's one they
Yeah.
shouldn't have lost.
Yep.
Now you got 2 losses. You lose in Jerry's World Saturday, and that's going to be a tough order, right?
Yeah.
To win that one, then you're staring down the barrel of under 500, which is never a good place to be at this point in the season. But I think that one's intriguing. I thought that Arkansas showed a lot of fight at LSU. That was a
Yeah.
50-50 game right up to the end. And with this Max Johnson thing, I mean, I know that Max Johnson, arguably the best backup quarterback in the league. Maybe somebody would say that's not arguable, and I could buy that too.
Yeah.
But that you pick Connor Wegman as a starter because you feel like he's your best option. So by definition, you've downgraded there a little bit. I'm just fascinated to see what we get out of both teams this week.
I'm fascinated to see that too. And if we're going to talk about the quarterback conversation, obviously, look, there's a reason Wegman was the starter. He was their number one choice. Now their number two ain't a bad number two either. But at the same time, I'm interested to see what that dynamic is between Jimbo, between Petrino, between Max Johnson, because, I've said this in the past, offenses when they're playing the best is when those guys, the head coach, if he's an offensive guy, or the offensive coordinator and the quarterback are in total sync. And I think when you're playing, especially in this game, look, both teams in this game know the magnitude and what's at stake here and how this is most win. But it's two desperate teams, two desperate coaches, and now A&M's got like a little variable of a backup quarterback. It spices up the game a little bit. And so, and it's what you said, Chris, if Arkansas loses this game, and what that would be 3 losses in a row now, and you're staring down the barrel of under 500, and you still have the majority of the season to go. Like, that is not a place you want to be if you're Sam Pittman and the Hogs. And so that's going to be a slugfest. I really think it's going to be a slugfest. And as you said, that game last week between Arkansas and LSU really was a 50-50 game. It really could have gone either way to the end. And I'm interested to see if they can bring that same competitive fire, because if they play the way they played last week against LSU, I actually think Arkansas should win this game. Now, I also seen how they played against BYU and other teams this year as well, and it hasn't been that way. And so, look, it's going to be a spicy one, no doubt. In Jerry's world, everything's bigger in Texas, and I think the stakes are just as big for this one.
Yeah, here's the one we've not talked about this week much at all. That's Alabama and Mississippi State. If you look at the recent scores, Alabama has dominated that series. And I know you're going, well, of course, Alabama's dominated just about everybody for 15 years. But what I mean by that is you would think that some of these years, State has had some pretty competitive offenses and defenses. You would think that they would make that maybe a 1 or 2 score game. That's not happened. Alabama's just blown State's doors off in that rivalry recently. But State showed a little life last week throwing the ball downfield, actually a lot of life. I mean, Will Rogers threw for almost 450, I think. Here's the thing, and I cannot get over this number. And I guess you could say, well, they played Texas. They've played, the South Florida game was one where they de facto suspended Milroe, and the team reacted strangely to it. Said that's another one. And, Ole Miss last week, Alabama's schedule's not been the easiest. I get it. But if I've got my number right, Alabama's averaging 5.7 yards an offensive snap. That is just unbelievable to see that on paper.
Yeah. And, I think, look, we all saw, when we saw that Texas game, to me, when I saw the Texas-Alabama game, it was more of a, wow, Texas is really improved under Sarkisian. They came into Alabama and they beat Nick Saban in Alabama. And then a week later, it was, oh, maybe Alabama's really not that good when we saw the USF game, right? And so that's kind of been how the storyline's gone for this season. They turn around, they win a game at home. Jalen Milroe steps into the fight. Is not, the offensive talent they've had at the quarterback position in previous years with all those guys who are now starting the NFL. But he gives them life, and he gives them fight, and probably the best chance to win. I think this is an awesome opportunity for Alabama to win 2 games in a row, get back on track, get some momentum heading to the rest of conference play. Find a way to kind of return to form, if you will, of what they've been. I think a huge opportunity. At the same time, it's exactly what you said about Mississippi State. I watched them the first couple weeks, and I was just kind of like, meh. Like, they didn't look the same. And I don't know if that was, it probably was a lot to do with, Mike Leach's passing. I think Zach Arnett may have been rushed into, a head coaching decision. It just looked off. It looked off.
Yeah.
It didn't look like the Mississippi State team that we've seen, gritty on defense and explosive through the air on offense. Now that returned last week. It returned last week. I don't know if it was a different approach offensively. I don't know if it was Will Rogers just kind of being streaky at the gate, but it returned. And when they play that way, Mississippi State is dangerous. They are dangerous. They can give anybody in this conference a game. And so those are the two dynamics of this team. I think Alabama, it's a great opportunity for them to get some momentum, winning 2 in a row and kind of getting back to who they are as a team and their standard of play. Mississippi State, it's kind of the same storyline. If they can get back to playing their brand of football, which is, like I said, gritty on defense, explosive through the air on offense. We saw that last week against South Carolina and gave them a run for their money. I think they can give the Tide all they can handle in this one.
All right. We'll be back at it tomorrow from 11 to noon Central. Trey Wallace is scheduled to join us tomorrow. So we will talk about, probably in bits and pieces, all 7 of the games this weekend and hit your questions and comments and all those things. It goes from 11 to noon daily. I think we may have inadvertently put an earlier start time up for today. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but just looking at the comments. So if we did that and got some of you guys in here prematurely, my apologies. That was not our intention. I think Blake is in Eastern time today and set that, and it may have defaulted to an Eastern time zone without his knowledge. But in any case, if that's what happened, our apologies. We didn't mean to inconvenience anybody. But anyway, thank you for watching us here at Southeastern 14 on the SEC Daily. He is Gavin Schoenwald. I'm Chris Lee. God bless you guys. We'll see you again on Friday from 11 to noon Central.